Hello, my name is Frederick Valles. I'm one of the founders of Optmyzr. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second of our three-part series with Mike Rhodes about how to grow your agency. Today he's going to be talking about teams, so that should be really interesting, and I might interject a little bit as well about my experience having worked at Google for such a long time and having done the corporate thing. If anyone wanted to see the last session we did about 2 weeks ago, that one was about systems, and we've put that up on our YouTube channel. You can also still register for that webinar if you prefer to watch it in a webinar format. So, Mike, thank you for joining us again today. Good to have you back.
Mike, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Looking forward to this.
Good. So one thing we wanted to do, just to give Mike a little bit of a sense of who he is talking to as far as, how much a team matters. Are you a one-person team? Are you a big team? So we do have a few poll questions. So I'm going to launch the first one, which is going to ask you, who do you work for? All of these are that you are somehow involved with PPC. Of course, it might be that you have nothing to do with PPC yet. In that case, I'm sorry, there's no option for you, but maybe select the one that's closest to you. So Mike, while people answer that poll question, tell me a little bit about the company that you work for.
Right. So we've two businesses here. The main business is a done-for-you agency, like many people on the call. We're about a dozen strong here in Melbourne, with a little bit of with a few team members overseas. Got a couple of ex-Googlers over in Hyderabad, helping out with things. So it's been as I'm sure for many people on the call, it's been a journey of starting out by myself, hiring that first person, going, what the hell am I doing? And slowly growing, organically bootstrapping it, no funding, no debt, and growing and figuring out all this hiring stuff as we go, and still figuring it out. I would like to preface that for everybody listening and watching this.
We're all here to learn from each other, right?
Yeah, that's it. I ain't the master of this.
Yeah, and so it looks like most people here on the call today are part of an agency PPC team. That's about 64%. Mike, 30% are PPC consultants, and then the rest are in-house teams. I'm going to launch the next poll. So this one's going to ask you how many people are on the PPC team. Again, just a few options you can choose from, so go ahead and do that. I'll tell you about my team right here. So Optmyzr, the company I co-founded, is a PPC management software suite. So software as a service, obviously, but we help you automate and streamline many of the tasks that a typical account manager would like to do. Now, we've actually built this tool with, I think, what is an impressively small team. So we have 4 engineers, and then we have a team of 9 people in total. So mostly engineers, a bunch of founders, and then a bunch of people to help with the support as well. But that's what we do, and hiring is definitely something we always have to think about to make sure that we have as many people as needed to support our customers, right? I'm sure most of you have that same thing that you're looking at. So let me share the results of who's on the call today. So 27% of people here have a PPC team of just one person. So that's probably that 29% of people who also said they were consultants. That's probably the same people. And then 40% have between 2 and 5, 27% have 6 to 10, and there's 7% who have more than 10 people on the PPC team. So those are some impressive sized teams there. Okay, so that's it for the polls. We'll have one more at the end of the session to see if you want to get more follow-up about Optmyzr or about Agency Savvy. But with that, I'm going to let Mike run the presentation. And Mike asked me to interject a little bit here and there, so hopefully we won't go into too many very distant tangents, but that happens. Hopefully they're interesting, and we'll share some anecdotes. So Mike, the floor is yours.
I am known for my tangents. Thanks, mate. Well, look, 10 years at Google, you understand big teams and things far, far better than I do. So yes, please add your vast wisdom to this. I'm going to start with, like I did last time, a couple of maybe negatives, maybe myths around building a team. Having spoken to hundreds of agency owners about this topic, if you're working in an agency, but you're not sort of at the top of the tree at the moment, it's not yours, then you might be thinking, what the hell am I doing on this webinar? Why do I need to know about building a team? I don't manage people yet, to which I'm going to say, but I'm going to assume for this that you will do, that you've got ambition, that you want to grow, and that one day you're either going to be managing a team or you're going to be owning your own thing. So I'm going to try and make this as relevant as possible to you. It sounds like we've got a lot of small team agencies, so I'm going to assume, therefore, that a number of people on this call own that small agency. Perfect. In which case, I'm going to assume you're very like me, and thinking, but I'm an entrepreneur, I do the big idea stuff, I don't do the detail, I'm not a manager or a people person. You might be thinking, I know nothing about HR. Me too. I knew nothing about HR at all 13 years ago when I started WebSavvy. So I'm going to try and share some of my mistakes and learnings and where I've got to, but as I said before, definitely not perfect at this and still learning every day. A big one that I hear is I don't have time to hire, or hiring is hard. Yes, it is, but you don't have time not to. And we'll talk about leverage in a little bit. And yes, if hiring's hard, firing is even harder, especially in Australia. The rules are different in every country. I'll talk a little bit about firing and some things to do there. If you're freelancing, so it sounds like about a third of us on the call, the most common objection is I can't afford it. I'm barely covering enough to pay all the bills and bring a bit home. I can't be thinking about hiring someone else yet. Totally get it. Been there, done that. The first time you hire a good person, and yes, we've all made those hiring mistakes. I'll talk about that a bit too. But you can't afford not to. And the way this was described to me years and years ago was, look, don't expect that person to be as good as you. Don't expect them to be another you. But imagine if they could do 80% of what you do, or even 60% of what you do. That's not going to be, it's not going to replace you. But now if you had two people doing 80% of what you do, how much does that leverage you? How much can you do do more of the stuff that you are uniquely good at? We talked last week about unique ability and the task stack and doing the stuff that you are brilliant at, which is probably the technical stuff, diving into the new stuff of AdWords, figuring out how to use Optmyzr in the agency, figuring out where Google's going with all of their AI stuff. Maybe it's the sales side, but you need somebody underneath you to be ticking the box to add RLSA to every ad group, or do that stuff, the more tedious stuff that needs to be done over and over again. You need help. I was chatting to a guy last week. He's over in the UK, and he's got these great ideas, but he's a one-man band, and he's doing this crazy stuff and learning optimized press and loading stuff up to a YouTube channel, and there's so many tasks. If you look at that task stack, honestly, there's so many tasks on there that could be done by somebody much less experienced, much less skilled than you, and we've got to keep moving up that task stack, got to keep thinking about the value, and I know I'm going to talk about it again, the robots are coming. How do we keep adding value? How do we stay ahead of all of that automation that's coming? This is one that gets mentioned a lot too. There's this sort of the feeling that you have to be good at everything. Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach calls this the rugged individualist. I'm certainly good at this one, but I need to be good at this. Or you are good at everything, and so you end up doing it. The best businesses are created by people generally that aren't great at everything. They were C students, and they need to hire people to do these things. Because we can do stuff well, we tend to end up doing it, and that can really, really slow you down. So,
yeah, exactly. It's about, like you said, it's faster to do it myself. That's a pitfall that I often go through, and kind of have to figure and think back to last week's session. But if you can actually write it down, maybe that is the one time you spend a lot of time training, but then the next person actually picks it up and actually do get that efficiency.
And it's efficiency over time, right? It's
Exactly.
Go slow to go fast, as one of my good mates, Nick Takaral, says. It's I love that, go slow to go fast. Another friend of mine has this sticker across the top of his computer. How do I do this so I only ever have to do it once? So he's always thinking
Well, I
about
think
it.
it was Bill Gates who said that he likes to hire lazy people because lazy people will figure out more automated and faster and easy ways to do things.
Right.
And that's exactly the
That's nice.
quality you want to look for in one of these new employees. So even if you haven't figured out how to automate it, I mean, and there's that classic story of, I think it was an employee at IBM who basically outsourced his whole job to China.
Mm,
Um, right, so that's a bit on the
yep.
extreme side, but yeah, it's, even if the other people are not as good as you are, if you take the time once to write it down and train, and eventually you get a lot of benefit from that.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit too, my 10-80-10 framework. And this is a big one, no matter which of these sort of three categories you fit into. A lot of people think that um, if this is annoying work for me, then I'm going to insult people, or it's going to be painful for people if I give that work to them. Think back to the unique ability stuff from a couple of weeks ago. Some people love paperwork. Some people love doing bookkeeping. Some people love cleaning. You know, it's like the stuff that you don't like doing, just because you don't like doing it doesn't mean that everybody doesn't like doing it. And once you have that mindset shift that I hate this stuff, but somebody out there loves doing this stuff. Somebody wants to do this stuff day after day after day after day. And I'll talk about the difference between process managers and project managers, which again is a Dan Sullivan distinction that I absolutely love and really changed my mindset around those two things. So I would urge you to believe that all of the stuff that currently drags you down, the stuff that you go, oh God, I've got to do that, when you hear yourself doing that, or should is a swear word in my house, but when you hear yourself saying that, know that somebody else can and will do that work and love doing it. So I'll go back to that the freelancing bit and talk to that for a sec, or small agency, to just to really sell you on the fact that, you know, growing is not a bad thing, and yes, hiring can be hard, but it is worth the effort. What do you want to do? Where do you, if you're, whether you're freelance consulting or that small team right now, which is most of us on the call, and I would put myself in that bucket too, of a team of around about a dozen people, what do you want to do? What's the ambition? How big does this need to be? But it needs to be bigger than one. So what's the goal? Is it to do really cool stuff, to be on the cutting edge, to have great clients, cool clients, doing some really cool stuff, you know, getting to play with all the latest tools that get announced at Marketing Now, Next, or whatever it's called, that we don't get to play with until Christmas time, thanks Google. Is it to just have a great place to work? I mean, one of the reasons I created an office now, Fred, I know you're very virtual with your team. You're Denmark, India, South America, Palo Alto, all over the planet. And I know very, very good agencies that have the same model, and totally virtual, totally distributed workforce. For me, I actually wanted to have an office. I actually created the office just before we had baby number one, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to work from home with baby number one arriving. But I love the social aspect of it. I love coming into a room full of smart people and the bouncing ideas around and the banter. And we're kind of, one of our values is seriously fun. So we're kind of head down, bum up, getting work done. It's not people sort of sitting around in beanbags checking Facebook all day. There's a lot gets done in here, and I'm very, very lucky to have an amazing team. But I love coming in to see them, and I think that's attracted people that also value that social aspect. One of the guys told me the other day, there is no place I would rather work that I can think of, including Google, which is about the best compliment I can imagine. That people really, really, really love coming into work. So that is one of my goals, certainly as a business, to be the best place imaginable for people to work. Your goal may be to get that promotion, to get more cash, whatever it is. I'd imagine for a lot of us, it's freedom. And I'm going to mention his name again, Dan Sullivan, has this 4 types of freedom that he talks about. There's freedom of money, freedom of time, they're the 2 obvious ones, but freedom of relationship and freedom of purpose. So freedom of relationship, not having to work with that guy, you know, we have another rule in here, which is no dickheads, which got expanded last year to no dickheads and no lawyers. But if someone is a pain in the ass to deal with as a client, or actually if someone is rude, they're gone. So I just will not tolerate that. If they're a bit of a dickhead, we'll give them a warning and we'll say, look, what you just did, sit them down and have a chat. And it's on the agreement that they sign at the beginning, that what we expect from you is honesty and just civility and play nice or be gone. And that's certainly one of the rules inside of Agency Savvy as well. It's just life's too short to deal with dickheads. And it's wonderful to have that freedom, to have that option. For me personally, it's this mob. The reason that I always knew that I would have my own business, and I'm on number 4 now, is to be the best dad that I can possibly be. That's the most important thing for me. It's not anything to do with the money, but it's to have the time to go hang out with these 3 and be a dad. I love that photo. This is another mindset thing that and I will get to the good stuff, don't worry, it's coming. But I firmly believe that business is a team sport and that we are better together, that a group of smart people doing cool things is far, far better than sitting there doing it by yourself. And so for the 30-odd% on the call that are currently that one-man band, I'm going to try and persuade you that hiring and growing into that small agency, and if you're currently in that 2 to 5 basket, growing a bit more. And I'm personally, I'm pretty happy being that sort of football team size. I've really got no ambition to go and create a 150-person agency. I really like the kind of dozen or so people that we've got, and we may sort of stay around this size. Don't know, but it's a team, and it's a really, really good team, and it's leverage. What a team gets you is leverage. And I'm just briefly talk about a couple of different types of leverage. Obviously, your time. I wandered off on a couple of tangents last time, talking about going on holiday and sitting in internet cafes in Italy and whatever. I didn't want to do that again. I wanted to be able to go on holiday and not be tied to a computer. For me, that's super, super important, because if I'm on holiday with a family, then I'm on holiday with a family, and that's personal time. That's free days. And nothing is going to interfere with that, because if you're on holiday with your family and you're constantly checking in or constantly on the phone, your family want you back. So leveraging your time is, for me, the most important part of all of this. Leveraging other people's skills. We tend to think that we should be good at everything. But if you're brutally honest with yourself, there are other people that are better at stuff than you. For me, the earliest place that I noticed this in the agency, and so I think everyone can relate to this that does AdWords, is the person that writes great copy is probably not the person that's playing with pivot tables and understands stats. Those 2 skills don't usually live in the same brain. And as soon as we realized that very early on and hired people that were much, much better at copy than Steve and I, my first team member, and we were good at the numbers side, but neither of us were particularly great on the words. As soon as we hired for that, what do you know? Things got better. We've just started using Data Studio quite a bit for reporting, and Caitlin, who does all of the graphics and design stuff in here, as well as being an AdWords account manager. She's a bit of a unicorn because she can do AdWords and design, but she's just turned these Data Studio reports into a thing of beauty. Clients love them because she's got that design side. If I was doing them, they're going to look like a technician built them, and they're going to be fairly dry, fairly boring, and far too many numbers. And just, leverage other people's skills, please. And please have that mindset of, again, just because you don't like doing it doesn't mean that everybody doesn't like doing it. I'm reading this book at the moment, Where Good Ideas Come From. It's a very, very interesting read, recommended to me by Dean Jackson. And one of the biggest things he talks about in here is where most great ideas from. He actually breaks it down and sort of how the brain works and where ideas are created. The biggest source of innovation and new ideas is sitting around around a table with a bunch of smart people. And so again, that's what we're doing in here every day, that banter, oh, I've got this thing, and then someone else improves it, and someone else makes a suggestion, and someone says you can't do that because of this, and oh yeah, okay, but you could do this. Ah, yeah, what if we did this and that with a bit of this? Great. That percolating of ideas and bouncing ideas around, that's really what this book, sort of this conclusion it comes to. That's where good ideas come from. So another great reason to be building this team. We talked about the task stack last time and breaking it down into stuff that could be automated, maybe not yet, but could be automated, stuff that can be done by someone with a lower skill. You don't want your highly experienced, highly paid AdWords team sitting there, like I said, ticking boxes because I have to add this thing to every bloody ad group, or I have to change it from content to, or change it from audience to content for my display network groups, or there's a lot of tedious stuff, or trying to get bloody Data Studio to show the numbers that you want. There's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't need someone with 7 years experience playing with AdWords, and they will love you for it if you can get that off their hands. And this was a biggie for me, realizing a few years ago that I was building the agency based on finding unicorns, on people that could both run an AdWords account, understand numbers, understand a bit of stats, maybe be half decent at copy, and be really good on the client side. That's a unicorn, I reckon. Very wide range of skills, and I'm very, very lucky that we do have a number of those unicorns on the team. But I realized a while back that if I was going to scale Web Savvy and have the time that I wanted, that I couldn't base building the agency on finding more unicorns. And I'll talk a little bit about EQ and IQ in a bit, but by having that wider base, we're able to be much more flexible, and I get vastly more hiring options available to me by not trying to find someone that has all of those very specific skills all in the one brain. So, good old Socrates, a bit of know thyself. So what has really helped me with this is being brutally honest. Well, I think it was good to great, confront the brutal facts, and being brutally honest about what you are good at, what you're bad at. And these are a few tools to help you figure that out if you don't already know. The Kolbe Index is a wonderful, wonderful test. Well, not test, it's not a personality profile, but it essentially shows you what your instinct is. If left to your own devices, this is what you would naturally gravitate towards. So it's kind of where your energy goes in these various action modes, they're called. But for $50, please just go spend the $50. So kolbe.com, kolbe.com. Spend the $50. You get about a 20-page report with this thing that explains what these 4 numbers mean. And if you've listened to any Dan Sullivan stuff, Dean Jackson, Joe Polish, they'll talk about this all the time. I found this through Kiyosaki years and years ago. A lot of these smart people that have been in business much longer than me absolutely swear by this thing. And there are loads of these things. There's DISC, and there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. But if you get all of your team to take the Kolbe test, and then you get someone that understands what all these numbers means, a Kolbe practitioner or certified Kolbe person, they can tell you with freakish accuracy where problems are going to be inside that team, and where gaps are inside your team that you might need to hire for, and where the clashes are going to be and who's going to work well together. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool, and $50. Another one that I highly, highly rate is Strengths Finder, and you just Google that one because it's a bit of a weird URL. It's $20 to take this test, or free if you buy the book. So buy the book, there's got a code in it, and you can redeem the code on the site and go take this for free. The more you know about your strengths and weaknesses, I think the better leader you're going to be in the business, and the better team you're going to be able to create. And I've talked about this one already quite a bit, but unique ability, the updated version came out last year, or maybe the year before actually, with a workbook. I bought this for everybody on the team, the book and the workbook for Christmas. I know, what a wonderful Christmas present to get. You're thinking champagne, thinking night out on the town. No, you get your book about unique ability from Mike. Thanks, boss. But I would highly, highly recommend you have a look at this one. This is, for me, it's an absolute game changer. It's a way of thinking about your ability and where you should be spending your time that is just second to none. And then the last one in this section, can, want, will. Can't remember where this distinction came from. It may have even been from Kathy Colby, that you'll ask somebody to do something or listen to yourself talking about what you're going to do. Yeah, I can do that. Well, can means that you've got ability, but you're not committed yet. I want to do that, so the motivation's there, but again, it's a commitment stuff. I will do that means now you have committed to doing that thing, preferably by a fixed date. So when you're sitting around the table in your team meeting, I would suggest that you listen for these words. And if someone says, yeah, I can do that, then ask them, when will you do that by, but will you? And just making sure that the commitment to do the thing, preferably by a certain date, is there. This is a fairly new one for me, but I've been experimenting with it. I've been listening to people's language, and it's been quite an interesting one. So can, want, will. Do you want to dive in and talk about any of that, or any questions at this point that have popped up before I dig into delegating and hiring? I'll take that as a no. Silence on the other end. All right, let's talk about delegating. I used to say there are only two things that you need to do in business: predict and delegate. I've expanded that to three now, which is mentoring. I think a huge job for us as business leaders is coaching and mentoring of the team, and not being that rugged individualist trying to do everything, but it's about enabling everybody else. So drawing the org chart upside down, you as the owner of the agency or as a team lead are at the bottom of that org chart supporting everybody that's above you. So I'm not going to talk about predicting and robots. I'm not going to talk about mentoring much on this call. We'll point you to a couple of resources, but just a couple of things that I've learned the hard way about delegating. It's such an important skill. Excuse me. There's really only three reasons that you need to delegate something: because you don't have the time, you don't have the skills, or you don't have the mental energy. And even if you do have the time, again, like I was saying before, if you can delegate more of that stuff off your plate, it frees your time up for the more important stuff, whether that's sales or the stuff that you have that unique ability for, or whether it's hanging out with the family or going for mountain bike rides or going on a trip to Europe, or whatever it is, but freeing your time up for the stuff that is more important to you. Skills, we've talked a lot about. Mental energy is a big one. You know, we all feel like, I should be able to do this. I need to do this. Oh, I've got to do that thing. Again, somebody else out there loves to do that stuff that you don't like to do, which is hard to believe sometimes with some of the stuff that we do, but it's true. Somebody out there loves it, so let them do it. Biggest thing about delegating is this idea from Scrum, agile stuff, software stuff, which is not just a software dev thing. Using Scrum in business. John Sutherland, I think, Big Red Book, something about using Scrum in business. Wonderful, wonderful book. Giving people a clear picture of what this looks like when it's done and done well. Couple of things on this, because I think this is worth it. And I think this is something that I have not done particularly well in the past, of really thinking through all the way to the end. I tend to be a little bit more shoot from the hip and, oh yeah, here's a good idea, we'll head this way. And I'll sort of paint a fuzzy picture of the first milestone. What I'm trying to do more and more and more these days is to go slow to go fast, is to slow down and think that through and really sell myself on this is something that's really important for us to do, not just another Mike's crazy idea. Whether that's building a tool, building a script, and using a new tool within the business, hiring for a particular position, pretty much anything you can think of inside the business. Really sell yourself on that first. And again, whether you own the agency, whether you're a manager, and all of this stuff, if you're thinking this doesn't apply to me, I don't run an agency, I'm on a small team. Again, I'm going to assume that you will be managing someone one day, that you have the ambition to grow, and therefore this will all be very useful and very applicable in the near future, hopefully. Really thinking through where things might go wrong, which may sound a bit counterintuitive. We're not supposed to be negative. We're not supposed to think about failure, rah, rah, rah. But thinking about failure in advance is actually a really, really useful thing to do, and to think through where things might go wrong and where things might break, so that you can proactively put processes in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Really stressing the importance, what's the why of this project. Now, this could go all the way down to an individual task, but usually this is in the context of a group of tasks, a project. Why are we doing this? Why is it important to the business? Making sure that you're delegating to the right person, not just the nearest person with a pulse. That's probably quite an important one. Giving people constraints. I'm a massive, massive believer in the power of positive constraints, and that could just be a deadline. Doing a webinar with Fred on Friday morning at 6 a.m. Need to get those slides done before the webinar. That's a powerful positive constraint. There's no point getting the slides done this afternoon. It's got to be done on time. And giving people that success criteria. We'll know this is done and done well because this will be true. And again, you've got to do the thinking up front in order to do that, but that's maybe half an hour's work to make the rest of the project, the rest of the task, go so much smoother. And then the hard bit for us micromanagers, I'm a recovering micromanager, is get out of the bloody way. So not worrying about how it gets done, just painting a very, very clear picture of that outcome, and then getting out of the bloody way. Took me a very stupidly long time to learn that and to really get that. And yeah, let's just say the team are much, much happier now that I've figured that out. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I can't, see any questions if you're asking them or chucking them in the question pad in GoToWebinar. So kind of flying blind, but I hope that's useful for you. A couple of things where delegation goes wrong, and this comes from a wonderful, wonderful lady called Shannon Waller, and I'm going to give you a couple of resources at the end, but she has a podcast. She works for Dan Sullivan, and she has this wonderful expression of a drive-by delegation, which I really love. I am so guilty of doing this so often in the past, and yes, if I'm really honest with myself, I probably did it last week. I'm trying not to do this anymore, but when you walk past someone's desk and go, oh, could you do the thing with the butts and the yep and the thing, yeah, a bit of this by next Thursday? Great, awesome, thanks. Haven't really thought it through, haven't done all that stuff that I just said on the last slide, and just kind of lobbed that onto someone's desk. Try not to do that. Learn from my mistakes. The other one,
Mike, just to confirm, I'm sorry to chime in, but there are no questions right now. But we didn't actually invite people to ask questions at the beginning.
That's true.
But yeah, if anyone has questions, please pop those into the box, and I'll make sure that Mike is able to see those. I love your example there of the drive-by delegation. The other one that I used to love at Google was we had this one product manager, and whenever we made a suggestion during a meeting, he was like, "Cool, that sounds like an awesome project. You go and do it." And eventually nobody would make suggestions anymore because they knew it would just overload their plates, even if they weren't the right person to do it.
Yeah, which will completely kill innovation, won't it? Yes. Okay. Thank you. The delegation death grip, like I said, definitely been guilty of this before in the past, of asking someone to do it, delegating that, and then maybe not getting out of their way, maybe just hanging on to that a little bit too much, and being that micromanager. So again, getting out, or hire smart people and get out their bloody way, is essentially the subtitle to this entire episode. I've written a bit about this, and I believe that there's something missing from the 80-20. I'm a massive fan of 80-20, and there's a lot being written about it, mostly by Richard Koch. For me, there was a bit missing when it came to certainly what we're talking about here in terms of team. So if you want to visit that website, I've got a reasonably long blog post there that I wrote a while back, and this was a core tenet, a core module in the Agency Savvy course, and it's this idea of 10-80-10. You should be doing the 2 10s. So, and what that means is the first 10% is getting very, very clear, and this could be a individual task, or it could be a collection of tasks, a project, it could be the entire business. Getting very clear on that first 10%. What do I need to delegate? Getting very clear on what does it look like when it's done and done well, and delegating properly. The middle 80%, and it doesn't start as 80%, it might start as the middle 20%, but your aim is to grow. 80% of this work goes off to somebody else or a team of people, but you are not involved in that. And then, which is the sort of, right, I've got it all off my plate, that's where 80-20 kind of stops, right? Get very clear on what are the 20% of things that you do that add 80% of the value, and just do those. And it's hire people to do those and hand that work off. Well, the bit that was missing for me is the bit that comes in the end. Why people think it's just faster to do it myself, or this outsourcing stuff is a waste of time, is because then that work comes back in and people get the big red pen out and go, oh, shit, wrong. It would have been faster to do this myself. I've got to correct this and correct that. And we're almost going to go into school teacher mode and correct stuff. I've certainly been guilty of this with a bunch of stuff that I can think of off the top of my head. But if you, instead of correcting at the end, if you make this final 10% here about coaching and mentoring, so that that person that's just been doing that work understands maybe how you want it done, or maybe you weren't clear enough about the outcome, because really how they got there shouldn't matter too much. But if that final 10% is the coaching and mentoring to make them better, to grow them, you're investing in them and growing them, appreciating them, then that whole feedback loop, that whole life cycle is going to get better and better and better. That was the very, very quick version of 10-80-10. Have a check of that blog post. Would love to get your feedback on that through the Facebook group or wherever. But this has been an absolute game changer for us inside the business over the last 4 or 5 years. So hopefully... Yeah.
Sorry to chime in. But there was a question that came in about something you talked about a little bit before. So as far as when you put people through the tests and you hire someone new, do you typically bring them on a periodic trial sort of basis, or and I know the laws in Australia are different, so it may not be as easy to fire someone as it is in the United States. And I guess this leads nicely into that next section. But
it does.
When you do make that offer, how does that typically work out for you?
Yes, we'll have so getting to this bit, maybe I'll speed up a bit, but we'll have I've gone completely blank on the word. What's the word? Oh my goodness. Probation period, where it makes it much easier for both sides to part ways. The legal maximum, I think, in this country is 6 months. We typically do 3 months probation period. You generally know pretty quickly. We did have a lady, I won't mention any names, a couple of years ago, interviewed incredibly well, passed all the, did the test task and everything really well, came in, met the entire team. I'll give you our process in a sec for hiring. All of that went really well, and within about 2 weeks of being in the office, we all knew this ain't going to work. In fact, we probably knew within a few days. And yeah, my job is then to make that hard decision. Well, it's actually a fairly easy decision, but a hard thing to do, to tell that person don't bother coming back in, and I'll pay you out for the rest of the month, but just, don't bother coming back in tomorrow. You're not a good fit. And let me talk about culture too, which this will answer that question better than me trying to answer that question. So I'll talk a little bit about how we hire and talk a little bit about firing. Um, Gotta love the A team from the 80s, but hiring A players, cannot stress how important this is. And yes, I know there's a war on talent, and yes, A players cost a bit more, but they might cost you 30% more, and you'll get twice or three times the productivity and the work out of an A player. And don't tolerate, for those managers and business owners, agency owners listening, don't tolerate the B player, because the B players won't get better and become A players magically over time, or the C players definitely won't. They will drag the A players down to the point where the A players will leave and go somewhere else. A players want to hang out with other A players. I mean, look at Google. The place is full of A players. It's the cream of the cream. And that attracts more A players, because you want to hang out in a knowledge-based game like this. You want to hang out with smart people that are having good ideas and that get shit done. That's super important. Before we hire that person, both the person I'm talking about and in general, I'm a huge fan of auditioning, giving people a test task, not just interviewing them. And that could be if I'm hiring someone overseas or locally, doesn't matter. I may have told this story last week, but when I was in Toronto, I was 19, I moved to Toronto for the summer, lived there for a few months, and I knew this ancient thing. What was it called? Ventura. As Xerox, as a desktop publishing system. Because my dad had worked for Xerox, so we had Ventura at home, and I knew how to use it. It was kind of one of those things that only graphic designers knew how to use. Saw an ad. It was really, really well paid. As a 19-year-old bum, they're backpacking and not earning much money. And there's this ad for this thing, and I walked in and said, "Yep, I know how to use it." He went, "That's lovely. Prove it." And he gave me this A4 sheet of paper, this flyer, and said, "You've got an hour. I don't expect you to finish, but recreate that on that computer. Go." And that was game changing for me, because it didn't matter what was on my CV. It didn't matter what I said I could do. It was prove it. Do it right here, right now. Get on with it. Show me what you can do. And that's really stuck with me. So I will have new hires do, it might be an AdWords audit, or go create a data studio report, or here's an Excel sheet. Find me some stories in this data. Can
Yeah,
you?
we do that too, Mike. We love doing the Excel example, and for us it's interesting because oftentimes we find people are really good at something we didn't expect. So we are interviewing them for one position, and then we give them an Excel task, and then they open up like macros, or in Google Sheets they go into Google App Scripts, and we're like, whoa, you know how to do that? Maybe we should be talking about engineering to you.
Yeah.
Or if somebody is a little bit more on the soft skill and is like, well, I don't know how to do that problem, but they actually like explain it really well, then we're like, hey, you might actually be really good on the phones and help sell our product or something like that. So it actually helps us hire people into the right position too.
Which perfect segue into this next one, right? EQ or IQ. I always used to look at that IQ side, and hire for smarts. But I think more and more these days, the computers are going to be doing more of that stuff. I mean, Google has said we're an AI first company. Look at what they're doing with all the smart displays, smart bidding, all of that stuff. Now, smart humans still got to hire smart people, don't get me wrong, but smart people working together with smart machines. I actually think you had you quoted the Wired article in your post on Search Engine Land that I was reading about 3 minutes before we jumped on the phone this morning. Where they're talking, that's the future, right? Smart people working with smart machines. We were talking about this at dinner last night. A bunch of mates that sort of are in that sort of fintech AI space. It's augmenting the human skills. So the doctor won't be thinking about how does this drug play with this drug if this person's got this disease. Like a good doctor can only read 0.1% of the literature that comes out every year, and that's if they spend a ton of time reading. They can't possibly keep up. But the AI, the machine, can be in the background doing all of the analysis, the diagnosis, but we'll still need the doctor for the bedside manner bit, for the people skills. And so because we've, over the last 2 years, put a real emphasis on relationship, strategy, creativity, and automation, that relationship side, particularly of someone that can just work really, really well with a client, of get that client talking. I'll talk about this next week when we talk about clients, or in a couple of weeks when we do the final part and we talk about clients. But talking about their kids, not your kids. It's one of the best ways I've heard relationship skills described. Hiring people that are just great at building those relationships. Yes, you still obviously have to deliver great results as a digital agency, but those relationships count for so much, and getting people to that trusted advisor position as quickly as possible, hiring for those softer skills, I think is more and more important now. So this is half an hour that I would highly recommend that you listen to, and this is Dan Sullivan talking about this distinction that he's made between project managers and process managers. This is worth just a couple of minutes. I think we might end up running a tiny bit over today, so apologies for that, but this is worth digging into for a couple of minutes. There's two very different types of people that you're going to need to hire, and you're going to need both eventually, but it's really good to understand the distinction so that you can understand who you most need to hire now, particularly if you're that freelancer or that small team of 2 to 5. Who you hire next is super important. So a process manager loves running those systems that we talked about 2 weeks ago. They love doing the same thing over and over again, maybe improving that system, but they want to just keep doing that stuff. That's not me at all. I am so not a process manager. I love the new stuff, the new ideas. The project manager loves the new ideas, loves your new ideas, but they don't like repeating things. They're not good with processes, but you need both. Now, the way to know is to look at how people react when you give them something new. So if I hand you a new thing and you go, this is really cool, and you put that at the top of your to-do list because you want to go play with the new thing, you're a project manager. Project managers will put new things at the top of their to-do list. A process manager says, yep, that's a lovely idea. They put it at the bottom of the to-do list because they've got all of this stuff. I'll get to that at the end of the day, maybe, once I've got through my processes, once I've got through this stuff. So that's a great distinction, and how to know if someone's project versus process manager. You need both, but who do you need next in your business is a great question to be able to answer. Very briefly on firing, as I was telling the story about the lady who shall remain nameless, fire fast. I knew that if that person had hung around, she was going to drag everybody down, and worst case, I'd end up losing some core players that just wouldn't have tolerated that. So the decision was easy. It's still a hard thing to do, but the decision was easy, and we just had to do it as quickly as possible. That's why we have the probation period. And I'm never going to screw anyone. I'll pay them out for the rest of the month or whatever, but just please don't bother coming back in tomorrow. And thankfully, I've only had to do that a couple of times, but I've hired a number of people that didn't last very long, or hired the wrong person. And yeah, the sooner you can admit that to yourself, the truth of that, if you need to, definitely get legal help. I think a lot of people hang on to people that they know shouldn't be around because they're concerned about getting sued or doing something wrong. So just find someone smart, I don't know what they're called.
Mike, no dickheads, no lawyers. That rule doesn't work in this case, does it?
Yeah. So occasionally you need a lawyer.
Yeah.
I just don't want them as a client.
Oh, okay, that's what you meant.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no dickheads, no clients. No dickheads, no lawyers was a client thing. Yes. And I would just urge you to change that mindset that them not working on your team anymore is the best thing for you and for them. And that may even mean that you help them find that next position, and helping them realize that staying on your team is not going to be a good thing for them either. I suppose all of this is just don't tolerate it. Don't think, oh, it'll get better, because it won't. And again, it will drag everybody else on your team down. It'll drag you down, and it'll drain you of energy when you, oh God, I'm just thinking another way of explaining this. Whoever you're thinking about when you're lying awake at 4 in the morning, that's probably the person that shouldn't be on the team.
Well, and it's the
that.
same thing like with a negative client, right? It's the negative clients who take up most of your brain cycles, and then you end up doing less good work for the clients who are good.
Yeah,
I think it's the same here with teams, and I think from having worked at Google, the question is not always, do you want to move this person? Do you fire them? You can fire someone from a team without firing them from a company. So you can basically acknowledge, hey, you're not great at this task, and maybe we put you in the wrong spot within the company. But
yeah.
you're really awesome at making landing pages, and maybe that's an actual need we have. So why don't we try that for a while? You'll be happier. We'll see better results, and everybody's going to be better off.
Yeah, true. And it's certainly easier with a company the size of Google. There's a lot more positions to move it into, but it is a bit of a running joke in here that pretty much everybody isn't doing today what they were hired for. Because I am very, very open to that. And I'm a huge, huge believer in unique ability, and I want people to be doing stuff. I always say, like, look, you're not going to be doing stuff that you love 100% of the time. But if we can aim for 50% and someday for 80%, that most of the time you're doing stuff that you actually enjoy doing, that doesn't really feel like work, and keep the stuff that you have to do, but you don't particularly like doing, but let's keep that bit to a minimum. If you find that, like Caitlin we hired her for graphics, but we also knew that she sort of had this sort of interest in AdWords and analytics when we hired her, and that's playing out, and she's going to be a wonderful relationship manager, wonderful account manager, and we'll have to hire somebody else to do the graphic stuff probably by the end of this year. Right now, she's probably about 75% AdWords, 25% graphics. But that's great. If she loves doing that, lovely. Do more of that.
Exactly. I think you have to know how quickly you want to grow your team, because back when I joined Google in 2002, I mean, we were so small, and we knew that we were going to need people to do completely radically different things, even within 6 months. And so they hired for people who were smart, but not necessarily with experience in the task they were going to be doing initially. Now Google is much bigger, and I do get the sense that they can't hire the same types of people anymore, because you're going to be hired to do bookkeeping. Well, you're going to be hired to do that for the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe then something else will come along, right? So depending on how fast you're growing, what size your company is, I think you do have to keep that in mind. Do you hire that specialist who just loves doing that one thing, or do you hire someone who's smart and who's more like that project manager who enjoys constant change and is willing to grow in the direction that the company needs?
Yeah. And I think for me, curiosity is a really, really important trait that I look for. Resilience and enthusiasm. I really feed off people's energy, whether I'm speaking on stage or whether it's in the room. And so just hiring people that are naturally happy, I've found is just a really, really good thing. If we actually, I remember the last round of interviewing we did, and we got down, I'll give you my system in just a second here. We got it down to like the last, I think it was 4 in-person interviews that we did. And I swear that 2 out of the 4 walked in miserable. I'm like, really? It's a job interview. Surely you'd walk in with a smile on your face and say hi, and they just were grumpy from the first minute they walked in. I'm like, there is no freaking way that we're hiring you. I just found that amazing that people would do that. Anyway, hire for culture fit. I've moved a bit about culture. There was a slide around that. It's coming up in a minute. But hiring for that cultural fit, so someone that fits your values first and foremost. I found this to be far more important than skills. Hire for enthusiasm, teach everything else. Kind of rings true. But hiring people that fit the team, that fit the culture that you either have or that you want to create if you're just starting out. Be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs. Don't hire the first person that rocks up that can fog a mirror. It does often take a little bit of time to find the right person, but it is worth waiting for that person, particularly when you're small, because hiring the wrong person is such an expensive mistake to make. And that's why, yes, you've got to have that probation period. And if you realize it's the wrong person, and God, I've hired a few of them, then you have to end that as quickly as possible. So our system for hiring that you are welcome to swipe and deploy, we ask a bunch of initial questions, and I go into this way more detail in a whole module in Agency Savvy if you want to really dig into more, and I'll talk about that right at the end. We've got a special deal because you're a friend of Fred's, but a bunch of initial questions that we will ask them, one of which is, if required, could you create a short 2-minute video explaining why we should hire you for this position? So if required, could you create a video? Well, most people are going to say yes to that, at which point you go, awesome, please send that to me by next Tuesday. If they can't do that, you don't want to hire them. If they can't figure out how to hold their phone up and record a video, and a 2-minute video, if they send you a 12-minute video, you're probably not going to hire them. If they can't follow instructions during the hiring process, they're probably not going to be a great fit for you down the track. We've talked about this a little bit. We always do a test task. No matter what the role is, we'll find some test task. We're hiring for someone that can do AdWords scripts at the moment to supplement the team we've already got. There's a ton of great test tasks we can do there to see if they actually know JavaScript, or playing with Excel, playing with pivot tables, playing with macros, VBA, whatever it might be. You can think of a test task, and we'll pay for that usually. We're not trying to get free work. I know some agencies will do that, but like, oh shit, we need to audit this account. Let's hire someone and we can have all these people audit this account for us. We don't do that. We will pay for the test task. It's generally something that ought to be taking them about an hour or two. It's a great filter. And so this list I'm going to give you here, which is starting to look a little bit like a funnel, is actually a funnel. People will self-select, and if they say, oh, that's just, it's too hard, no, I can't be asked doing this thing for 2 hours to prove that I can do it. I'm it in a bit, I shouldn't have to prove this. Awesome. Thank you for self-selecting. You're out. So this is designed to weed those people out and designed to attract and pull in the people that really want this. So then we have a round of deeper questions. I like to ask things like, how would your best friend describe you? Lots of open-ended questions. What do you like to do when you're not working? What do you do for fun? What do you do to relieve stress? Just to sort of find out a bit more about people. Then a phone interview. Then once we've got it down to a reasonably short list, I'll pay for them to go into the Colby Index, and I'll pay for that. I'm quite happy paying for that. I'll explain to them the benefits of it, but you know, it takes 20 minutes, costs me $50, and saves me a ton of pain and heartache later on. And then, if you make it through all of that, if we're hiring here in Melbourne, then we'll do an in-person and typically a group interview. So that'll either be all of the team sitting around the boardroom table, or most of the team sitting around the boardroom table, or occasionally we'll take that person out to lunch, because people will tend to let their guard down a little bit in that more relaxed setting, and you tend to find out a little bit more about them. And so everybody can be asking them questions and in that more relaxed setting, and you're really, seeing if they pass. I think Google Hiring actually has this, something they call the airport test. Is this someone that you'd like to be stuck with in an airport for 3 hours? If you can't answer yes to that question, then you probably don't want them in the office 35 hours a week, every week. Very briefly on culture, because I know we don't have a lot of time left, but this is one of the best bits of advice I was ever given. Give your team a map. Mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Mastery, everybody wants to get better at the stuff that they enjoy doing. So give them the training, send them to the courses, send them to SMX to hear Fred speak, or to, I don't know, whatever thing is on in your town. Online training. Give them the training they need to master what they're doing. I give my guys a ton of autonomy, and flexibility is really important. Like, half of us are parents, most of us actually all of us all of the parents have young kids, so having that flexibility, kids sick today, I'm going to work from home, or I can't work today at short notice, that's fine. I heard of an agency the other day, I was reading a blog post about this literally 2 days ago, and if somebody was late, more than 15 minutes late, 2 or 3 times in a row, their pay got docked and they got a warning. I couldn't believe that. I didn't realize we were still in the 1960s, and clocking people in and out. I think that's insane. I think you treat people like adults, not like kids. But anyway, that's just me. Being very clear on values. Some of our values are, as I say, family first. We're not ridding the world of malaria. We're not doing anything that's life and death. The email can wait. If your kid's performing in the school choir, as my daughter was the other day, and I was a very proud dad, I took the morning off to go watch her. Or if the kid's sick, or if whatever, do that stuff, because it's way, way, way more important. I'm a huge, huge believer in transparency, both internally, so the team know the numbers, they know how much we make, they know how good or how bad things are going, and with clients, you know, there's nothing worse than sitting on a problem. I'll talk about that in a couple of weeks when we talk about clients, but you want to address that stuff before it becomes major, and I just think that's just generally how I operate in life, but I think it's really important for the business. And generosity of time, generosity of wisdom, that's another really, really important value, but being really clear on those values as a business so that you can hire based on them and reward based on them, recognizing people fulfilling the values and, you know, giving silly prizes and so on. Very quickly on meetings, and then just a couple of action steps. This really helps. So this is from a book called Traction, which I would highly recommend you read. Gino Wickman, one of the best books, actually one of only 2 books that I've ever read. The other is Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail, but one of the only 2 books that I've ever read on or bought on Kindle, on Audible, and a physical. I've only ever done that twice, and Traction was one of the 2. So how to run meetings, and this is great if you're that small team, 2 to 5, this works perfectly all the way up to, you know, larger teams. But have a time limit, and everybody knows what the time limit is. We start with positive focus, so just a little bit of good news around the table. So we do our meetings 10:30 on a Monday, so it's the same time every week, and we start with good news, and that could be good news in the business, it could just be personal stuff, but you start the meeting from a happy place. It really does make a difference. Reporting, so this is not going deep into stuff, it's going around the table and each person is responsible for the bit that they need to report on. How many members are in Agency Savvy? What's the rev from the Facebook team? How many audits did we sell last week? They're just reporting on stuff. We're not trying to solve stuff at this point, just to bring everybody up to speed. Then we might look at what are the roadblocks? What's the non-standard stuff that's going on? Are there any issues with any clients? Throwing all of those issues down on the whiteboard, on the table, wherever it might be, not trying to solve them as they come up, but just get them all out. Then we can prioritize those, pick the top one, and go solve it. And Gino Wickman in the book Traction goes into far, far more detail about this. He's got a whole system for this, but it's brilliant. And then a little bit around what's ahead, what's coming up, what do we all need to be aware of that other people are doing, and then giving it a score. And I found this to be really useful. So we gave it a score out of 10. The Canadian judge on the team always scores things a little lower than everybody else, and it's become a bit funny, but that's okay. But it's really interesting. And if someone scores it less than an 8 out of a 10, you get to ask why and what can we do to make this better. And that, after we sort of did this score for maybe the first 3 to 6 months, our meetings really improved. We really came together as a team, and this is probably about 2 years ago, I'm going to say. It really made a difference following this process, which felt a bit weird at first, I have to say. It felt a bit kooky. I now have an agenda that goes up on the screen. It's a Google Doc. I just copy it from the week before, plug in a few things, talk about pipeline, talk about things that we need to talk about, and we follow that agenda. And because I don't tend to follow processes all that much sometimes, I know they're really important, but I can be the world's worst at following them. It's kept me on track. The team know what's coming. It's just made for a brilliant start to the week. Everybody knows what's going on. Stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. I would highly, highly recommend it. And then just quickly on the cadence of meetings. This is from Vern Harnish. A couple of great books. Scaling Up is his most recent one. But you have slightly different meetings. So we have weekly meetings. We don't do daily stand-ups because we're not doing a ton of project-based stuff. We're doing sort of more repeating stuff, being a mainly AdWords agency. But we have our weekly meetings, same format, slightly different format for a monthly, where we'll talk more about the finances and the numbers and so on. A quarterly, which is a longer meeting and a more strategic, and then an annual off-site, go away somewhere. We stayed at this lovely place outside of Melbourne back in February. Take the team out, partners came in, we all stayed over there for the night, all had breakfast together and had a beautiful meal and got pissed. And it was great. It was a cracking way to start the year. So I would highly recommend something like that. So a couple of questions for you to finish. First, get very, very clear on what you want. So particularly if you're running that small agency or it's just you at this point, what do you want? Where are you in 3 years' time? How big do you want this thing to be? And 3 years, I think, is a really good time frame. 25 years, 10 years is too far out, and a year isn't enough. So I'd ask that question of where are you in 3 years' time? What are your company values? Get very, very clear on that, because that's going to determine how and who you hire. And then figure out who do you need to hire next. Use that distinction of process manager versus project manager. As Fred said before, it's probably, in the early days, more project manager. It's probably someone that's more flexible, that loves the new stuff and can pivot and do totally different things one day to the next. But you also don't want to hire another you. So if you're very entrepreneurial and a million miles an hour and loads of ideas, then maybe you need to have someone that's your foil and the opposite of you. And then a couple of my secret weapons. I've mentioned a ton of books as we've gone through this, but if you prefer audio, then a couple of great podcasts. The one on the left, horrible graphics, but was recommended to me only about a month ago, and I've just been listening to this recently. There is a ton of really good stuff in their manager tools. And Team Success Podcast, which is by Shannon Waller that I mentioned before. She's on Dan Sullivan's team, has been for 20 plus years. Wonderful lady, incredibly intelligent, and that if you have a small team, I would highly recommend that and just devour that every episode. It is a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And if you want more of this, if you want my agency owners blueprints, training around AdWords, analytics, data studio, Facebook, I've got a couple of 10+ hour courses, all inside Agency Savvy. We've got a special deal because you're a friend of Fred's. Just head to agencysavvy.com/Fred if you want to come and join us. Would love to see you in the group. A bunch of smart marketers doing some really cool stuff. Would love to have you there. Mate, I'm a little bit over. Apologies for that. And we're done.
Thank you, Mike. So I loaded up the final poll. If anyone wants us to follow up, you can click one of those options and we'll reach out to you. But this was super interesting as always, so thank you, Mike, for taking us behind the scenes at your business and helping us all understand how to grow a better business. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks with another one of these sessions, and then we'll take a look at how to find great clients and how to keep great clients. That's probably a problem that's pretty relevant to all of us. So because we are out of time, we're going to take any of the questions we have in the system, and we'll just follow up with you on email. But thanks again, everyone, for spending an hour of your time with us, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you. See you.